Hello, friends and others. So what are we doing today? We're doing some Railsing. I forgot to install the thing, which was smart. So is that reload? That's still right. Okay, so basically, what have we got? Boop, boop, boop. So we have this guy here. So let's just reload this page. There we go. So we've created tasks, and if you don't know this little magic trick, might as well show you. So I'm testing a thing today called TurboBoost, which says here, which is welcome to TurboBoost commands, enhanced reactive programming model for Rails/Hotwire applications. So there's a bit of a story here, right? I'm on a project, and I've been looking at other things to do it, and so Rails monolith, Rails on the back end is a delight. It's wonderful, it's great, it's fantastic, I love it. Rails on the front end story of Rails is not so good. So the defaults in Rails, you can run it in API mode and spit it out to an API, or you can use inertia.js or whatever. But the default stack in Rails for doing front end is not great. It's pretty old school, and in part that's due to the leadership at good old Rails HQ, thinking that a lot of things are unnecessary, and there's ways to round off some of those edges. And the project I'm on kind of requires me to carry on, at least for a little while, using the default sort of reactive-ish part of Rails, which is Hotwire. Now, for those unfamiliar with Hotwire, let's go home. It's this, hit them all over the wire. It's an alternative approach to building modern web applications without using much JavaScript by sending HTML instead of JSON over the wire. And TLDR, the longer you spend time with Hotwire, I think the less you like it. A lot of old school Rails devs really just want to avoid JavaScript, so I don't know why. I'm not a great lover of JavaScript in any way. Like, it's not like my favorite language, but it's a necessary evil, and it's fine. It's just totally fine. If I was doing a thing from scratch, it wouldn't be the language I'd pick, right? I like Ruby, I like Elixir, I like Python, I like Lua. I like all those languages more than I like JavaScript, but JavaScript's fine. But sometimes it can be quite fun and quite pleasant. Speaking of, part of Hotwire I actually like, so it's a series of technologies. Overall, I've come to the conclusion it kind of sucks, because there's some logical things to Turbo, and so these are two things, right? So Turbo and Stimulus are the two main chunks. There's this native thing for rendering native elements. This is the documentation for it. It's incredibly sparse, and Turbo, especially two parts of Turbo, are quite high in cognitive load. Stimulus is actually incredibly simple to get your hand around. It's a little bit verbose, but it's also really nice. It's like a modern adjacent post-ES6 version of jQuery. So basically you have a controller, then you just have targets, or you can have static values, things like that, and you have a bunch of methods, and then all you do is you attach to the controller. We've set our target, and we're saying data action click hello greet. So the hello controller, hit the greet method, and you click it and it'll do the thing. So we've got a it's just taking the output of that. So we just go Dennis, because that's your name. Even if it isn't, it is. There we go. I'm going to tell you Dennis. Pretty straightforward. And that's kind of it in a nutshell. It does some other stuff. It's just basically a nice way to wrap just very vanilla JavaScript in just a little bit of sugar using data attributes. It's quite nice. It does go a little bit deeper than this. You can have these controllers communicate between each other. It's stateless. It doesn't have reactivity built in, but that's kind of by design. It's I think they describe it as a modest JavaScript framework for the HTML you already have, and that's very true. And as it goes, it's actually kind of pleasant. There's something about it I really like. But this part's all kinds of cringe. So it's one of those things that's really good in principle, if you don't know anything about Turbo. So it comes in 3 parts. Ignore that native part. So Turbo Drive. This comes out of the box by default and every else thing. So we've got our task, and of course one Charles the task, and then go create. And it's very quick, right? It can feel faster than this, but we're not doing anything. There's no styling on here at all. So if we go into network, you'll see what it's doing. And then if I hover over this link, you can see it prefetches the link. It's one of the things it does. And this is turned on by default. So every Rails app feels very quick, just out of the box. And in production, they're very fast, despite what you might have heard. And part of that is the Turbo links thing, which I have no problem with. It's fine. Or Turbo Drive. Basically, it pre-caches the page and just swaps them out, so it does a sort of like SPA style thing, kind of for free. It's pretty nice. But the other parts are where they start to get a bit more annoying. So turbo frames, the best way to describe a turbo frame, which they still confuse the hell out of me, it's quite a weird cognitive jump. So a turbo frame is kind of like an iframe, apart from you can embed a part of a different view in another view, right? If it has a corresponding frame. And it's so confusing half the time I have to look back at the guides to write one fresh, because they're that weird. And you can also update the contents remotely of a turbo frame, but the part that does that is turbo streams. Well, not really, or not, right? So basically, if you go into the handbook, you can probably see, if I do turbo frames, so we have a frame here, message 1, comments, and then on another page, we've got message 1, right, under edit. If we update that form, or embed that form on this page, right, so we've got ID of messages and we've got a link to edit the message. It will grab the contents of this form and put it where the messages used to be, right? So if you if you follow a link by default, if you follow a link where the corresponding frame exists, it will swap the content of it for you, right? It does go deeper than that. You can, yeah, so here's an eager loadings with a turbo frame, so we can say, yeah, we're saying when this is visible, through whatever means you make it visible. So the idea is you start with a turbo frame. If that doesn't work, you add a stream. If that doesn't work, you can make it more granular with a stimulus, and you incrementally add more functionality as you need it, right? So it's for bringing functionality or bringing responsivity and reactivity to a CRUD style application incrementally, right? So here we can eager load once. We can say, well, here's source email set aside. So it will look for the root of source email set aside, and it will put that in the frame when it becomes visible, right? Makes sense. Gets more confusing. You can lazy frames, you can cache frames, you can manually update frames, and you do that with streams. So frames are kind of seem pretty cool, pretty magic. I think there's like a little thing if you attach a form to like a create button and you wrap that create button in the frame. I think let's just have a quick go, because I always get very confused by turbo frames. Let's go into the index of our tasks. There we go. Nice. And if I just do, I think it's like new task path, and then if I just go like this and do turbo frame ID equals cake, right? Go in the bottom, and half the time I get this wrong because it's actually so much more confusing. Turbo frame. There we go. Okay, and if I go back to my form, so form, pretty sure if let's just go back, and I'll grab this as well. I'm pretty sure if memory serves, this should do the thing. Do that, and then we'll just do that, and then turbo. Oops, close it. So close turbo. Thank you. Frame. There we go. And I'm pretty sure now, memory serves, what will happen is if I go here, I go new task. There we. Oh no, it didn't do it. Give that a reload. There we go. There we go. So by clicking new task, we replace what we've done is we've grabbed. Let's just make sure we know this is happening. Is refresh this, right? We'll just go to /tasks/new, right? Here's our thing, and on our form page, what we're gonna. Oh, I haven't got bloody Tailwind. Let's just do a little div style equals, I don't know, width 100. Right, 100, and we'll just do background red. There we go. So we've got a lovely, beautiful. There we go. That's fine. Whatever. Who cares? So there we go. We've got that rectangle there. So you can see that has getting replaced. So I go to new task. It's going to do that. If I go to out of tasks new, and I go to tasks. I go new task, you see it's basically populated that, right? It seems kind of magic, it's because it is. That's some of the basics of what a turbo frame does. It's actually amazing if you just need to add a little sprinkle, a little smidge to a very CRUD style application, like website, let's be real, to a very CRUD sort of thing, you can add a few bits of inline interactivity sort of stuff inline. It's pretty cool. So we could do another one, right? So if we had the form again, we could wrap just the name part with a submit on the label, and we could have that so you click on the name of the task you've created and it will just inline populate the edit for it, right? It is kind of cool. It is kind of cool because that's how much work that is, right? It's a really convoluted mental model to get your head around to do anything more than that. 'Cause you can stream to frames as well. You can push things into frames remotely. That's the most basic version of it. So that's you can lazy load stuff as well. So you can say when it comes in view, it will just put something in the frame. There we go. And you know it goes deeper than this, and then you go into Turbo Streams, and this is where my real problem is, right? Because so far, kind of so good, right? So I could say, for example, if we go into here, we can do task controller. So yeah, let's say on create, we want to put a thing, right? So if we do, I don't know, we add this here, we just do format dot turbo underscore stream, right? Which is saying, in the response, we'll do a format for turbo. We can do this inline here, but I don't like doing inline. And then we'll create a new file, and we'll do, what's my syntax here? I forgot what it is. It's there we go. Go with that. Fine. Let's go with that. Okay. Cool. Oh, let's just do that, and we'll just do view app views tasks. Let's do create dot turbo stream, I think. Is it turbostream.erb? I can't remember. Turbo stream Rails. I always forget. ERB. Oh, why do I forget this? Oh yeah, turbostream. What was that? Specify location of turbostream. Yeah, there we go. So turbo. Yeah, update.turbostream.erb, that's it. Right, so update.turbostream.erb, so embedded Ruby. And basically what it says is we will target, we'll target, that should be an ID. So we'll have one called messages, so we'll just go back to our index. And you can see Rails gets a little bit, and we'll just do a little, I don't know, div hash messages. Right, and then this is the OG content, right? So, what was that on? That's on index, right? So if I go back to here, go to reload, this is the OG content, and then when we create a task, you can't really see it, so you can probably do this, blah, 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 create task, and then there we go. This will be appended to the element of the DOM ID messages. So what it's done is it's hit that controller action, then it's hits this stream here. And we could just do a different action. There's a bunch of verbs, so you can append, and we can just do replace, right? And then the same thing up again for create a new task. So I go new task, blah, 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 create task, there we go. And then I've replaced it, right? Is this all making sense? So this is like the basics of the turbo stuff. And, right, it's quick, that's quick. But I think in some people's minds it makes sense. Where this gets troublesome is we can do this, we can have any number of verbs, right? The thing is you always need a root to hit. Okay, so Rails has conventions, so if you create a resource, it's going to have a create, update, you know, standard CRUD actions. And you can have a turbo stream for each one of those. You can write conditional logic in them, all that sort of stuff. But you end up getting quite tangled, because I want to do something more unique than this, right? Than just do something on create. What if I want a different set of actions, okay? And I want to respond with something from the server. I have to then create a specific endpoint, right? So I have to go down here and say, well, I have an endpoint. I'm going to call this one like, I don't know, make task purple, or whatever the fuck it is, right? I'm going to have to create a new endpoint, right? So I'm going to do this, right? So respond to do f. We're not doing this for real, so it doesn't matter. Do f. And then we're going to do turbo, turbo stream. Okay, and then that'll be it. So yeah, this would be the way you'd write that, right? So yeah, you see what I'm getting at here. So you'd have an endpoint inside a controller simply to make a UI update. Okay, and then you can do little bits with you can do presentational layer stuff with stimulus. So that's the answer to that, right? So you can attach a stimulus controller. If it's something that isn't actually a transaction, then you can do that in stimulus. But then you're on your own. There's no framework in stimulus. What I showed you earlier is the sum total of it, right? You can attach to it. You have the same thing. You can hit methods, and you can kind of do turbo actions from it. But the thing is, if you have a turbo stream, you need some HTML to respond with. You need actually a rendered view to respond with, right? You can't just arbitrarily send back or arbitrarily run commands on the server and return their result. No, it needs to have it can't even be a partial. It needs to have a view and a root and a controller action in order to respond to it. Which means if you're going beyond the basic, do a little thing when I create, edit, or update a task, or whatever your resource may be, you're in a world where you have to start making specific endpoints just to service the front end, which sort of defeats the purpose. And if you are strictly sticking to CRUD actions, if there's no action to respond to, then you probably shouldn't be doing something in the interface. Cool, sounds great in principle, but in reality, in the world where applications have much more diverse application state, it becomes messy, and some other things become very annoying. So you can also do streams. You can make it broadcast, and it's not a small framework. There's actually quite a lot of features, but it's also quite a lot of mental load, right? So just to update that bit of text, I have to have so turbo frames only update other frames, right? But I can also, from that turbo stream, update the contents of a frame, right? So that could be updating the contents of a frame in a separate view, which will update its parent in another view, because that's where the nested frame is. So if I did task create, well, I've done create. If I make a change to the form itself in that turbo stream, that will then show via the nested form, because the form is on the create page still, right? So if I go back to my form, okay, and I just put an empty div inside my turbo frame, we'll do this, right? So we'll just do a thing up here. We'll just do a span, and we'll call it Bob, right? Bob the span. I am some words, right? And then we say inside here, where is it there? I can grab all of this, okay, and then I can say replace target, change that to Bob. And then, I don't know, thingy, I have no imagination today, right? And the same thing will happen if I go create a task. It's going to create a task, and then it should give it a reload. If I go new task, and I go down here, I am some words, and I do a new task, it's going to also append thingy 2 in there, right? It's gonna whatever, right? It'll replace the concept of thingy 2. Very visually messy, I know, but still, that's the point. So for simple stuff, it's actually kind of a fine system, right? I can have a bunch of responses to controller commands, but also you can do publishing streams, so you can broadcast real-time updates. So that lives in the model. So I can say in the model, model task, I can just do like broadcasts refreshes, I think it is. And a load of other shit, but then also I can just like target specific resources. So I could sort of say like, I could give it an ID. I could, whatever. I can target, and I can also add turbo actions in here if I really want, which will then hit in the model. But I can do other. But then you're in the model of an MVC app targeting specific pieces of UI on the front end. It's this horrible, massive clusterfuck. And to get any of this working, I've got so many views and so many locations to manage, and I need to be intimately aware of what's going on. And for like a little bit of interactivity, that's honestly, it's actually fine. And there's another thing I've not mentioned yet so far as well, which is kind of super magic, which is morphing, which is incredibly cool. Where like if I change the status on something, it'll automatically respond. So it will see like whenever and this is config free, right? So broadcast refreshes. So yeah, turbo stream from calendar. So what I can do is, if I had like my form, my edit form here, right, and I edit this and without anything else turned on and clicked create or edit or whatever, it would then broadcast that change, or it basically like the server would respond and say, hey, there's something different on the server. Send me back that version, and then something called morphdom, which is like a diffing engine. So it basically takes a snapshot of the current DOM, right? When it changes, it will then say, well, what's this new DOM? It would perform a diff between the two and replace the parts of the DOM that have changed, right? And then morph in and then slide in those parts into the UI automatically. And once again, the turbo morphing stuff is some of the coolest shit you'll ever see. It's fucking awesome. But it's got its limits, right? It can't do everything, but it gives you quite an SPA like feel, kind of out of the box. It's kind of brilliant, but when you get past that level of need, it very quickly all sort of falls away. Back to the thing where you're creating just have a turbo stream response to something quite small. You're having to create a brand new view that might serve a single purpose, that has to live in your view folder by default anyway. Has to live in your view folder. That's only there to respond to a specific endpoint that you've set, or a specific controller action you've set up simply for it to respond to something. So that's the point where it kind of falls apart really quickly, because that's it. And then even then, you've got so few levers to pull. You've only got, there's CRUD operations and responses to CRUD operations. That's it. That's what you've got. And anything more complicated than that, you're on your own kind of thing. So it's all just JavaScript ultimately. And Stimulus is kind of cool. There's a few libraries for Stimulus. Stimulus is a bit of this that doesn't offend me actually. So if you want to do sort of like semi real stuff, you kind of can. What's this? Build something real. Yeah, there you go. Here's how you build a clipboard thing. You create like a clipboard controller. You add that controller and blah 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 blah. Bob's the monkey's uncle or whatever. Then managing state is a good one. Does this work in here? So you can basically make like a slider, right? Like a little carousel thing. It's fine. It's pretty good. If you want to just have, and this is like raw JS, and you've just got a few like bits of sugar around it that make it kind of easier to reason about and quite uniform on the front end, which I quite like. But yeah, that's it. You're done. And anything else, you're in vanilla JS land. You can't lean on any of your framework. You can you can bosh in like a single page view component, but then again, all this complexity you're trying to swerve by doing this in the first place just immediately gets lobbed out the window. And also you've lost any uniformity, and you'll still have this malformed thing where you've got a bit of turbo and a bit that isn't, and people are like, oh, that's fine. And honestly, for me, that ain't fine. That ain't fine at all. It's actually a pretty messy thing. And there's like, with the response to things, you've got more than one event going on. You get race conditions in the UI, which you then have to deal with manually. And also, if things go wrong in turbo frames, so if something goes wrong in this frame here, let's say for example, I don't know, if I go into my form, right, and I just change this from cake to cack, give this a reload, go down to here, new task, I'll just get a content missing, and I'll get a 500, did not contain the expected turbo frame ID cake and will be ignored. That's as good as your feedback gets with turbo frames. That's all you get. That's sum total what you get. Because also this part is not attached to any JavaScript. Stimulus is the JavaScript. So you see what I'm saying? It's it ain't fun. It ain't fun. So yeah, it and also you have to go to so many locations just to make single updates. And some of the things are kind of magical, because they say don't rely on wiring up. You can see how let's go back to turbo streams. They're pretty powerful, but you can see how quickly turbo streams. You can see how quick this gets out of hand, right? Because it's a linear set of actions. So here we go. So we've got one here. Append something to messages, prepend the end, replace something else, replace this, update. Do you know what I mean? It's this linear sort of like progressive thing, but also in the context of a like reactive application. It doesn't hang very well, and again, you have very few levers to pull, and it's very hard to reason about. It takes quite a long time to learn if you're not wired up to sort of accept it in a specific way. And the documentation is really, really sparse. We have 8 pages, and a reference guide which has 4 pages. This is what you get. This is it. This is like, but it's so lacking in structure. Rails being something that is so heavily structured and so logic, like, it's got its own quirks, but there's a logic, there's a rhythm to it that you can kind of follow. This doesn't have any of that. It just says, I am simple and I am not JavaScript, and then it kind of falls apart. So, but while you're figuring out how it goes together, you don't really see that. You go, oh, this is cool, because bits of it, again, I'm not trying to sound like a big negative Nancy, bits of it are legitimately really cool. The first time you see that morphing thing happen, your jaw kind of hits the floor. There's a demo you can watch where it's one-liner in a header, right? And you get scroll preservation, and then you get this crazy level of responsivity inside applications. And also, it's quite easy to handle things like real-time events, and you can build a chat room in Rails in like 15 minutes. Some of this stuff is amazing, but it's such a limited remit. Like, the scope of it's so short, and then the minute you have to do anything more complex, it's very painful. Not a lot of work, but you still get to work very quickly. You can see how quickly it's a few lines of code to get something weird like this up and running, right? This crazy shit. So, where it's the prettiest thing ever, but you know what I mean? Like, so you are productive, but you need to buy in, understand the flow, get on board with magic, and also not do anything that's outside the scope of what it kind of does. Otherwise, it's pretty painful. And guess what? I've done all those things and found it very painful. So, getting to the main part of this video, 26 minutes in, is this thing, TurboBoost. So, a bit more background. This is what I've found out recently. So, the idea was, I want to rebuild the front. I'm going to rebuild the front of my project, but I can't yet because it's very close to being good enough to show humans to get a first round of feedback in order to move into a second round, right? I'm still half tempted to throw it all out, but fundamentally I do like monoliths. I'm absolutely fine with it. I just wish this monolith was better. And if you use something like Phoenix, which is the Elixir version of Rails, I guess, or you've used Laravel and they've got something called Livewire. I don't like Livewire either, but at least it's more capable than Hotwire. Livewire also sucks ass. And then LiveView in Phoenix is fucking fantastic. And it's the same basic idea. Apart from, it works more like this thing, Stimulus Reflex. So this has been around for quite a while. I've known a little bit more about this in the last few days. It is the way the creators and maintainers of this, that I think they kind of did Rails a bit. I wasn't around during this, I'm recent to Rails. They did the creators of Rails a big favour. Back when the entire industry was moving to SPAs, they had no answer to it. They had this thing called UJS, which is called unobtrusive JavaScript, which is a little bit like a shitter version of HTMX. And they had nothing else. And then this came along, and it's actually pretty cool. And I think the creators said from their own mouths they kind of expected this to sort of be the de facto way you do reactivity in Rails. And this is on the surface kind of similar, right? So this is but different. So it works via Stimulus, so it's an extension of Stimulus, which again is the part of Hotwire that I like, which is quite sensible. We have a controller, and then you have a thing called data reflex. All the reflex is, it's just a Ruby file with some commands in it, right? So we say click, similar to Stimulus, click, comment, create, right? So we've got a comment reflex, and then we've got the create action or the create method on there, and then there we go. Where is it? Where's the other half of this? There we go. So if we've got and we've got def create, and we can just do a bunch of stuff in Ruby. Full access to the entire thing behind. It's pretty straightforward, and also it lives separately. You can respond to things. It's a thing called cable ready, which I don't know that much about, which is a greater number of sort of verbs for responding to events. So this is still server driven. It's still rendering and returning markup, right? So fundamentally the same, but it's got a lot more structure to it. So it's got a little lifecycle thing. So we go. We've got like a lifecycle thing for the reflex itself. Pretty cool. And then it's got morphing. This had morphing before Rails. I think it's probably where they got the idea from. And then out of nowhere, Hotwire comes along, and I think just kind of steals their thunder and kind of kills this project dead overnight. And I think it was growing and becoming popular. But yeah, Hotwire became a default in Rails, and it looks like the creator sort of scrambled to be like, well, basically, what we think is this. It's reading between the lines. I think they're kind of saying, well, not even between the lines. Some of them say it openly. What we wrote before is better than this, but I guess, fuck it, fuck us, I guess. So yeah, these are the 4 guys who wrote it. Marco Roth and Nate Hopkins, the 2 people in question. I'm going to talk about a little bit more today. He's openly said, yes, well, this is better than what we've got in Hawaii. Because there's structures of this, and you can understand it. And also, you can have these attached to buttons. You can respond granularly. You can have as many of these things as you want. And you have the full access to the back end. You're not just tied into this idea of responding to CRUD actions, right? Or this ludicrous scenario where you're making actions inside your the MVC, or like entangling the model layer of an application with the fucking UI directly by broadcasting a change to a named piece of UI, which is a nonsense. I was like, I had a conversation with an AI, and I was like, just because they're good at this sort of shit, Google for you. And I was like, when they suggested that, I was like, what are some things that people, what's some sort of idiomatic, conventional things that people are doing to solve this particular problem I had? And they're like, oh, you can broadcast from the model, which solves everything. You can do that. You've got all the model hooks you can possibly want, But it's like, that's not where this is supposed to happen. This is not the part of an application that does this. Why would you do this? And I was like, are people actually doing this? And it was like, yeah, no, it's considered like once or twice, it's okay. It's like, well, once or twice, where do these goalposts end up before you end up with this crazy ass spaghetti? And that's the thing. It feels quite antithetical to what Rails is about, because Rails isn't very spaghetti-y. It remained like Rails apps grow pretty gracefully if you don't do anything stupid. If you sort of stick to or sensibly within, it's not limited in any way. But if you stick sensibly within the guidelines set out by Rails, and you can solve problems, and it makes it quite easy to solve problems. But unless you intentionally overcomplicate or do something very silly, Rails apps just kind of go on forever. And they, there's a myth, because Rails is post-sexy, which is now coming to a lot of the React stuff, where it's like, oh, I saw a code base, it was a mess. And you're like, was it an old code base? And they're like, yeah. So, well, there's your fucking problem. Old code bases can be a mess, but the more structured it is, the less likely that is going to be, because there's fewer decisions to make, right? So it's oxymoronic. So the trade-off is normally you lose flexibility, right? Which makes you then bend rules, which then makes all the structure fall apart. In real terms, that Rails is fairly resistant to that, from what I understand. Because it's old, it's quite rich, and also extending things in Rails feels like quite a natural extension of the API is really good. Basically, it feels like quite a natural extension of what you're doing. There's 20 years worth of patterns at this point, and everyone's done this. And also, it is run at some massive, like as big as they get type companies like GitHub, right? Is a Rails website. It don't get bigger or more complicated. And obviously they have challenges, but then at that scale, everyone's got challenges. So anyway, what was the point? Yeah, so Rails is actually really well structured and very conventional, and there's a conventional way to achieve most things. And when you have to do something outside those lines, there's lots of safeguards in place, and there's lots of Ruby's a very terse language, so it's always quite easy to ensure what's going on, unless again you're an idiot and you make things. Everyone can do that in any code base, right? You can make any code base terrible, but this Hotwire stuff's basically begging you to make it stupid really quickly. And again, if you're just sprinkling a bit of, if you've got a back office application or something that is just very, very CRUD driven, cool, actually, those little sprinkles are totally fine, it's totally acceptable, and actually super fast, super powerful. And I think anecdotally, the people I've seen who say, I love Turbo are Hotwire, the ones that actually sort out the challenge of making something really complicated with it, and it's probably brittle as fuck. But they're so developer and they don't care because they understand it, or they're working on something where those limitations aren't a problem for them. They fall into those two camps. Everyone else seems to just fucking hate it, and I think I fall into that third camp. There's there's scenarios I can imagine myself using it, right? If I was going to build a quick thing or a really cruddy small application really quickly, fuck yeah, I'd use it. Like, you can get so much cheap, cool stuff for free with it. But yeah, man, you want to go any deeper? Nah. And then, yeah. So basically, I think the rug got pulled out from under the feet of these guys, and again, it's a big thing at the heart of Rails is DHH runs a company, and what Hotwire does suits the way his applications work. So they wrote it to solve their own problems, and then they push it out, and that's part of the problem of having someone with a corporate interest with their own biases, or the biases that suit their corporate interests driving decisions in a framework that like hundreds of thousands of websites use, right, or millions of websites use, or whatever. It's not great, but you don't have to use it. You can opt out, because Rails isn't actually as optimal as you think. You can just not use it. It is fine, but it's irresponsible to say, hey, this is a default way of doing things. Yeah, it's a fucking huge foot gun, which I think has happened a lot in Rails in the past as well. I love it. It ain't perfect, but in comes this guy. So this is the same guy. This is Hopsoft, which is this guy here, Nate Hopkins. One of the stimulus reflex guys. So basically the stimulus reflex stuff is basically the same thing, works slightly differently, but it's kind of like a more sensible version of the same idea, really, where you can arbitrarily have bits of UI request things, and you can then generate a response to it, and then you stream that back over a WebSocket, and it morphs into your UI, right? Is the base idea. So they set about the idea of well, we've lost this battle, not a battle as such, but this project has been ripped out from under our feet. I'd love to use this, but it's effectively dead, right? It still works, but it's effectively dead, and it's not a long-term solution anyway, so why bother? So you're like, okay, so they say, well, let's do the sensible thing. Let's try and build bring back a lot of what we could do with stimulus reflex into Turbo, because Turbo isn't not powerful, it's just a mess. It's actually pretty powerful, it's just messy as fuck. And there's a few of them. So this guy, if you go to his GitHub, he's got some interesting projects. So he's got things like, I don't think he owns Stimulus Use, but Stimulus Use is one of them. Stimulus Use is actually fantastic. This one here is one, Turbo Power. So this brings a lot more verbs. Like I said before, those turbo streams, there's a bunch of verbs you've got for when you hit one of those controllers. So this adds a lot more verbs. So instead of just like update, replace, standard CRUD things, I think there's 8 of them. This brings like a shitload more. So you can do history actions, you can do reload pages, scroll things into view, all sorts. Interact with local storage, all that kind of stuff. It's pretty cool. But fundamentally, you're still tied to, you have to have an endpoint that you fire a request at, and it gives you a response that isn't arbitrary. So that litters your controller, which is not relevant to the rest of your API, right? Because that's the crux of it. If you need to do something that isn't covered by whatever the functional requirements of the base of your website need, be that CRUD or more than just CRUD endpoints, you got a problem, because then you're making endpoints just to service UI changes, which is a ludicrous proposition in my mind. So in comes this thing here, which is the other half of this. So there's more of these. There's like a couple more, but the main one I think is that Turbo, what was called Turbo Power. And the other half is this guy, although he's not updated it yet. But apparently he's still working on it, but we'll see. This is one of the other member of the core team. And this brings back the other half of it. So commands help you build robust reactive applications with Rails and Hotwire. They allow you to declaratively specify server methods that will execute whenever client-side events are triggered by users. That's not just a controller event, that's any event. Commands that you sprinkle in reactive functionality and skip the ceremony the typical REST semantics imposed by Rails conventions and turbo frames, i.e. boilerplate, routes, controls, actions, etc., which is the dumbest part of Hotwire. Commands are great for features adjacent to traditional RESTful resources, things like making selections, toggling switches, adding filters, etc. Basically for any feature where you've been tempted to create a non-RESTful action in a controller. Precisely what I'm talking about. In fact, I haven't read this until now, by the way. I knew what it was, but I hadn't read the actual words on this section. So commands improve developer experience of creating modern reactive applications. They share the same mental model as React and other client-side frameworks, namely trigger an event, change state, re-render to reflect the new state, repeat. Commands are executed via Rails before actions. That's like a model hook, a model callback, which means reactivity runs over HTTP. WebSockets are not used for the React critical path. So Stimulus Reflex relied on WebSockets. Rails is a bit slower than it needs to be with WebSockets. Their solution for WebSockets is written in Ruby instead of a faster language, because Ruby is not that good at like low-level stuff. It's not mechanical. It's fine for things like websites, despite its reputation, it's not so good at just churning through stuff. It's a lovely language to work in, but boy, it ain't fast, unfortunately. Crystal's fast. Crystal's great. Crystal's like Go. Crystal's like a similar speed to Go, but it's Ruby syntax and it has types. It's kind of the dream, but no fucker uses it, so I like it. I'd use it. It reminds me of Ruby, and Ruby's fun. So commands are tested in isolation as well as stands row control. So yeah, it brings back a lot of that structure, right? So under usage, here we go. So it does. So I think it says up here somewhere. TurboBoost commands work with Hotwire's turbo frames. They also work independently of frames. I don't know what that means by it. Just say works with frames or anything else. Who knows? Let's find out. So we're in virgin territory here. I've only sort of skimmed this. The example illustrates how to TurboBoost commands to manage upvotes on a post. There's no generator yet. But yeah, so we've got a turbo frame, that's what we showed before. So we've got, here's the Rails helper version. So DOM ID post, that'll pass in the ID. It'll pass into the ID, the resource, it'll pull out the right thing, right? It'll pull out the ID of this at post resource. So there we go, data turbo command, post command, upvote. And then inside here, we've got commands, post command.rb, yep. And we've got just a little method, post upvote, post find control. Okay, lovely. So we've just upvoted a post. And then it's going to re-render the new thing. Normal Rails turbo frame behavior. Aha. So then, then that hands out. So it intercepts basically the point at which, instead of going to a controller action, this routes it via a separate class for running more arbitrary stuff, and then that then hands over to turbo, which then the frame picks up and the frame re-renders. Right. Cool. So I guess. Yeah, so then instead of having the magic of getting the frames to speak to each other through witchcraft, because I think I made this look less annoying than it is in reality. With frames are actually slightly mind-bending in some scenarios. All of this is kind of, again, you've watched me fly through it and go, oh, and you go, oh, it's straightforward. No, it's not. It's actually not. It is simple, but its simplicity and how scattershot all is makes it quite hard to actually rationalize, and it makes it quite hard to reason about, which is part of the reason why you learn it so slowly. And also I think some people hate it. Some people pick it up just like that. I didn't. Some people do, some don't. It's very, very Marmite. I love Marmite, but I hate this. So event delegates to capture. So okay, how do you expose these though? Oh, okay, here we go. Okie dokie. So, life cycle, turbo's command start, files before the command is sent to the server, targeting froms. Okay, right, so TurboBoost commands target the closest turbo frame element. Like default, you can also explicitly target other frames just like you normally would with turbo frames. Okay, yeah, because you can make, so either through a stream or through other means, you can replace the contents of a turbo frame with different contents, right? Either through a stream or other frames. Again, it's all kind of ephemeral, and it can be the result of a controller action or various other bits and bobs and shit. It's hard to pass. But this is much more digestible. So we can say, data turbo command. We've got a example command. There we go. So example command, and we've got the work method. And then data turbo frame some frame ID. So just arbitrarily target another frame. So you don't. So then you're using the turbo frame as like a decorator or marker to say this is a reactive region, right? Cool. Or if not, it'll find the closest frame. So it'll traverse upwards and find the nearest one to hit something. So okay. So you don't specify a frame, it will just use the frame it's in. If you do specify a frame, it'll communicate to another frame. Pretty straightforward. Working with forms, right? So just specify the data turbo command attribute on the form. Okay. Nice. So I could just set a bunch of stuff for... so... So what will that do? Is that... Oh no, sorry. Okay, no, I was looking at the wrong thing here. Being blind. Okay. Form for post, form with model post data. Okay, fine. So, okay, so was that when that form is instantiated? It's going to do the thing? Question, I think. Server-side commands. The client-side DOM attribute data command indicates which Ruby class and method to invoke. Yep. The attribute value is specified with RDoc notation. Okay, yeah. So class name, method underscore name. Fine. So there you go. So an anchor can just fire off a command. Server-side components can live anywhere in your app. However, we recommend you keep them in the app commands directory. Commands are simple Ruby classes. Here from TurboBoost commands command that expose the following instance method properties. There we go. Controller, the Rails controller processing the HTTP request. Okay. Convert to instance variables. Convert to hash to instance variables. Okay. Returns a CSV select for the element ID, i.e. prefixes. Okay. The DOM ID helper, DOM ID selector element. The structure represents the DOM element that triggered the command. Okay, cool. So I can just say element and then I can append something to the element. Morph, append a turbo stream to a morphed on element. That's cool. Params. Yeah, okay, fine. Render. I can do render in there as well. So render's like this massive god method in Ruby. Sorry, in Rails it does a whole bunch of shit, but primarily for rendering bits of UI, partials, stuff like that. A generic render thing. It does a bunch of shit. An action controller renderer states an object that stores ephemeral states. So okay. Turbo stream, a turbo stream tag builder. Okay, so you can just build turbo streams off the back of it. So you can just okay. So a turbo stream tag builder, and then you can also just fire off turbo streams directly from here instead of building files. Great. So execute business logic. Cool. So here you go. Appending turbo streams. It's possible to append additional turbo streams to response from within a command. Appended streams are added to the response body after the Rails controller action has completed the rendered view template. So I need to just try this out actually, because the one thing's confusing. We keep saying after. No, okay. So that's just if you do a visit, right? Whatever. So it won't fire before whatever. Because sorry, a bit of language earlier made me think that maybe it is actually still tied to a action on a controller, but I don't think it is. It's especially powerful paired with TurboBoost streams. Let's open up a new tab. And there's no videos on TurboBoost on the internet. Setting instance variables. Okay. So you set instance variables in the Rails controller from within a command. Here's an example that shows how to do this. So we've got turbo frame tag. Yep. Command, post command, toggle all. Huh. Wait, hang on. So what's going on here? So we've got toggle all, post equals element check. Yep. So yeah. Okay. Ah, nice. Okay. So we can. Nice. Okay. Okay. So we've got a post unread method inside our model. That's good. Controller instance variable set all. Unchecked. Okay. Nice. Okay, that's pretty cool. Okay. Prevent controller actions. Sometimes you want to prevent normal response handling. For example, the consider needs for a separate form that updates a subset of user attributes. I've actually been doing that. We'd like to avoid creating a non-restful route. Yep, but we aren't thrilled by the prospect of adding rest to boilerplate for new route control. Yes, exactly. In that scenario, you can reuse the existing route and prevent normal responses handling with a command. Aha. Okay. So adding it into there will actually override the submission to the controller, right? So if this is create, yes, show, right? So yeah, instead of, okay. Yeah, so the form will send a patch request to users update, but will prevent normal request handling in the command, but running users update in the controller. So what we're doing here. So this is actually, okay, so this is user command. So user command example. Controller rent, okay, right, so so we can intercept what the controller sees and do something else instead. We prevent normal response. Cool. Remember commands, this is really powerful. The before action filter. Okie dokie. Means controller rendering from inside a command halts the standard request cycle. So yeah, that will go before any of the control. So that's very powerful. That's dangerously powerful. I like it, but I think you want to use that very judiciously. Fucking with the general flow. I mean, this is probably also why this will never be added to the core of Rails, or not, because if you think about, like, there is a doctrine for Rails that says provide sharp knives. Fucking with the flow of the controller response is that's pretty sharp. So broadcasting turbo streams. Also broadcast turbo streams to subscribe users from command. Cool. So broadcasting. Okay, fine. So I'm not so familiar with this specifically, but this is still, yeah, we're still doing a turbo stream channel and we're just doing a broadcast. So we can do, yeah, we can broadcast changes over WebSockets. Learn more. Here's the beautiful thing about Hotwire. Learn more about the turbo stream broadcasting by reading through the Hotwire Turbo Rails source code. Because people tell you, unironically, this. To be fair, right? Rails source code all looks like this. It's all because they're quite careful what goes in. So it's all really well documented. So you can actually gain a lot from this because there's, again, Ruby is terse and easy to read, and people don't actually make use of some of the wilder features in it all too often unless they have to. So you would actually learn quite a lot from this. The fact it's not documented properly and they're saying read, it's still funny, right? In a project this large to be like, hey, read the source code, and you're like, what? For how this works? I'm like, that's cool, but also shouldn't be necessary. But that's the extra credit work, right? Not the how does something actually work. Because there is some information in the Hotwire docs about, or is there? Turbo streams. Let's go into handbook, reference, streams. You get a page this long. So there we go. But then broadcasting is attributes. I mean, it's very short. Yeah? I don't know, man. I don't know. Is Turbo dead? Who's maintaining it? So many open issues. I have an issue with no fix. Nobody is triaging. So many open PRs. Only Basecamp high priorities just get fit more the rest of us. Look at that. Bit of drama. 240 open. Fuck. Race condition between page refreshes and lazy loaded turbo frames. Oh, that's familiar. So look. Very simplified page. So beautiful page, sub-content, lazy load turbo frame, details element. The turbo frame is configured to be lazy loaded as well as use morph to replace the content. I use page refreshes to refresh the content of the entire page. In the sub-content, I have details element. I try and prevent that it closes when morphing is applied. So I first hooked into turbo before morph attribute to check if the open attribute is modified and cancelled out of the event. So simple. However, sometimes the detail element's still closed. You get this a lot. You get a thing that's not happening, logically making some kind of sense, and then also a lot of Rails people are like, dry, don't repeat yourself. And if you've got, like, I found myself in a situation where on several different controller actions I had to update the same form with subtle differences between them, which basically means copying and pasting the same render with subtle differences in what's being sent into that partial, like 3 times. You could abstract it out another layer into a thing, of course you could, but then, you know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? You can't have like I don't think you can have like a create, update, delete stream, but also those files live in your view folder. So your view folder gets littered with additional files next to your view files, which are response files to controller actions that update a view. It's all messy. Sometimes the detail is still closed. I saw the events of the turbo before morph element arrive on details element as well, where new elements are undefined. My guess is while lazy load turbo frame refreshes, the morphing operation of the entire page is still ongoing. So the race conditions are interesting, right? So I had a thing where I had to update a counter, right? and for reasons, I do that in a job. Okay, so there's a little bit of a delay. It's a very, very short delay. But when I update the form, which then increment that counter, to reload the form means that not to reload the thing that shows the counter. Sorry, means that it receives it a split, like a hair too slowly, right? So it gets missed because it's not happened immediately. Do you know what I mean? So then I have to think about because it's hitting the controller action, I have to think but where the actual update isn't on the controller itself, it lives elsewhere. You don't get an immediately obvious way, and also nothing in the docs to say how do I wait for something, or again, how do I wait for a job? I can't directly poll the job and say, hey, when the job updates, then do this. Do you know what I mean? Because the job's not going to do that. There's nothing in the model happening with the job. It's going to update, and then I'll get the changes on manual page reload. So I've got some reactivity that just breaks because of a race condition I've caused. And again, it's fine. These things do happen on paper, but there's very few tools to deal with it, and you're absolutely on your own. It feels so underbaked. So yeah, this is really common. And again, these are solved problems, right? Oh, this is useful. It's open source. You have an issue with the solution. I suggest you create a PR and write text. Like, there are 70 open PRs. Like, cool. Thanks, bro. Can't see you up there. That horse, man. Fuck me, I didn't know they got that big. It's above the roof of my house. Jesus. So yeah, in general, noticed activity from maintainers happens in bursts. It's because the thing with Hotwire is, where is it? Whatever. The thing with Hotwire is it's not a Rails owned thing. It's owned by 37 Signals who run Basecamp and Hey. So they primarily update it for their own purposes, which seems like a really, it's just, I don't like it. This guy is quite well known in the industry. In general, I've noticed that activity maintenance happens in bursts. A few small PRs open for months, and then a few months ago, all of them emerged in the same morning. I went and saw that it spent several hours going through it. PRs emerged, like 40 PRs at once, and leaving comments on a bunch of others. So, and that was 8 days ago. So, I don't know. But yeah, having your 3-year-old framework being like, is this dead? Also, as well, the morphing stuff sometimes screws your ability to manually update the interface as well. So it's kind of, in a lot of ways, unless you get what you want out of the morphing for free first time, it's almost better to leave it turned off. So in this process of coming to my conclusions about this, I've spent a bunch of time with it, and I've left it on and fought against it just to sort of see what it can do, right? To see what these limits are. I'm not saying I'm some sort of genius or anything. I'm absolutely not. I'm just diligent in making sure I sort of, pay attention to how things work before committing to them. And then unfortunately having to sort of inadvertently commit to them anyway because you were still building out a bunch of other front end while you were... Anyway. So so let's get rid of that. Possible specify the location of a TurboStream template because they litter your view directories. So anyway, broadcasting TurboStreams, TurboBoost streams. Look at that in a minute. TurboBoost manages various forms of state to provide terrific reactive. I can imagine. So yeah, I'm not actually. There's something about all of this that I kind of like versus a lot of the boilerplate required to do something like this in React. And that transaction layer. So why I like inertia so much. All the complexities of handing over and reforming JSON and everything that comes with that is just not a thing in a monolith. It just doesn't happen. It just doesn't exist. So if you use inertia, it's not perfect either, but for the most part you just get the thing you're expecting. It's another thing that's quite nice about Ember is where it's got its own, where it uses JSON API and it's got its own pseudo ORM. The data is always in a kind of a logical shape already. You spend all this effort in an API building it into a certain shape to then manage it secondary. When you get all this for free, I kind of like the idea of having monoliths still. Again, like on paper, I kind of believe in this stuff, but I think so far, with the exception of, and again, they all have limitations. Everything's got limitations, but like even Live View in Phoenix, which is fucking great, has limits, right? I don't think universally it's necessarily a solution for all applications. It's not. It can be for a lot more, and to sort of say, go all in and we'll build this massive, we'll get a Next.js React stack, which is this unique instance of a thing where that degree of sledgehammering may not even be necessary. I'm not down for that, but I think if the alternatives are as poor as Hotwire, well. Right, so server state. Server state is the persistent state that the server used for most recent render. The state is signed, ensuring data integrity and security. Okay. The client includes the signed state along with optimistic changes to whenever a command is invoked. The server can then compute differences between the client state and the server state. Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. I have no opinion on that right now. Client state. Client state is a mutable version of the signed server state. Okay, wraps an observable JavaScript proxy. This allows for sophisticated techniques like data binding via custom JavaScript stimulus controls or web components. And there we go. Client state access on the client, like so. Okay. That'll need more documentation examples of the best way to use that. Page state maintained by the client needs to remember element attributes between server renders. That's nice. It's best tracking transient user interactions, such as which elements are visible. See, yeah, like I think a lot of this looks, if it's not this, it looks something a bit like this. When I was first learning stimulus, which I hated at first, I was like, I don't get why this is like this. And then slowly I was like, I'm kind of buying into it. I'm kind of buying into it. Instead of JS driving the entire interface, you are, and again, it's verbose. The problem with stimulus is stimulus xstim, that looks like it'd be something dodgy. Yeah, it's quite verbose. You go into the handbook, is it in the reference, I think? Yeah, so you get actions, so things like, yeah, you've got data controller gallery, the thing inside, data action, click, gallery, next. You've got a bunch of these verbs, not enough actually, but you do have some. But then these can get quite long, and then if you do values, so values, right? You can pass stuff into it. So here we go. So you've got data controller loader, data loader URL value equals messages, right? So we're passing this string into here, and then we've got static values, and there's like these formats. So this is automatically present to you as URL value. So yeah, you can do stuff with that, and also you can add types to them without going full on TypeScript. You can use TypeScript as well. Some basic types. There we go. And then they've got some default naming for it. Pretty straightforward. And then we've got all this kind of crap. But yeah, you get things like outlets. Outlets are the worst, right? So outlets are a little bit mind-bending. So outlets can mean you can communicate between each other, right? Using CSS selectors. So what we're saying here is data controller is user status. So is that. This one's chat. So we say data chat user status outlet online user. So data, right? This is the target chat user, I think. No, chat, right? So I think this is the value of, right? It's, yeah, so it's not great. That bit's not great. But yeah, so data chat user state outlet attribute is called an outlet attribute and is valued as a CSS selector. So data identifier, so in this case chat, so chat, outlet, outlet to outlet, yeah, right. It's oh no, there we go. Outlet user. So yeah, it's data chat user status is the outlet, right? So we've got stat. So right, yeah. So on the chat controller, we've got an outlet called user status, right? So yeah, in chat user status, and the outlet, the connector for that is the class of online user. So this is verbose, but you know what, it's not too bad. And the outlets you don't use all the time anyway. Yeah. So. But yeah, but yeah, the thing about Stim is you quite like it. It's you get this sort of thing where you get these little discrete, and they're sort of their guidelines is write them to be as generic as possible because they're stateless. So just make it generic. Like you find yourself writing things like visibility controller, and then you just got it, and you hook it, and then when you go to use it, you just hook it on, and you just wham. You know, it's nice. You go like you just go visibility controller. So you just do like. Data control visibility, and then you put the targets and you just put those in line and data attributes, and then you're done. It's pretty cool. and when you have a few of them, a little toolkit of all the simple bare bones JS stuff you'd import a library for, you go, yeah, I'm rocking with this. I like this. This is cool. It's not perfect, but there's something. The germ of it is something that's actually quite easy to like in a lot of ways. And I think a lot of this stuff will be something similar to like this, right? Because you have, instead of having like, this is part of that sort of like SSR thing, right? Is you can do some really powerful stuff server side and return that information back. You have a powerful server that's 20 years old that does this sort of stuff really robustly. Also, unlike JavaScript, for example, you've got something which is a native like language that you don't have to bother with like doing Node and shit to and then delegate to Node to make it Node do something on your behalf, then run it in JavaScript. You can just run Ruby code straight on the server, right? You can do it's like PHP in that way, or all those other languages. I mean, I'm splitting hairs here, right? But you see what I'm saying, right? There's fewer layers in place, and you have the full framework to already there, just ready to go, designed to do it. So yeah, and then returning markup instead of JSON makes perfect sense, because a lot of the times in the current hotwire scenario, you find yourself manually, and people say like, oh, can't you like manually, and you get the recommended as well. Well, just manually do that with just do a fetch. Just write, because you can just arbitrarily have pages have JSON, right? So if we go into here, it should have it, right? Let's go to app, task. Ooh. What is it? Views, tasks. There we go. So we've got this guy here, right? So yeah, we've got JSON already. We can just build it. I thought we'd just do a fetch, and you're like, why? Why? I could, but then the tools around it, again, I'm on my own here. So at what point do I just say, well, fuck it, I'll just use Vue, or fuck it, I'll just use React, or whatever? If you have to go through so many hoops to avoid the thing you're avoiding in the first place and have none of the benefits of it, and then all of the problems, more of the problems, the ones that have been solved years ago, just to avoid writing JavaScript, apart from when you do have to write JavaScript, you have to write way more JavaScript to have something that's worse and more fragile than the thing you could have done if you'd chosen the other platform you were trying to avoid in the first place, which will happen in a lot of scenarios. Why are you doing the thing? It's bananas. Unless you are 100% confident that the scope, which is again what they don't explain, like you don't need these frameworks. The thing is, in that scope, they don't explain that there's limitations to it, or how painful it can become quite quickly if you butt up against those limitations. If they're more upfront about the things that made it imperfect, instead of pretending it was a sort of all singing, all dancing system, then people probably have a better idea of it. And if you describe it as something which is about sprinkling some reactivity into a CRUD application and show how easy it is in that context, you'd get a lot of more friendly mindshare, because you're like, oh my god, that's really cool. I've got a backoffs application. You mean I can just update to a newer version of Rails and then put one line in my head and it becomes super reactive overnight? And it's like, yes, because that line's true. That's just straight up true. You get loads of that stuff for free, and you're like, wow. And people were like, wow. But then in terms of the broader community, that doesn't escape, because they go, look at that. They won't use inertia or whatever. They will do this stuff. Can't even do it. And because it's true, it's got limitations. But anyway, I think that the future of this sort of setup is something that probably looks a bit more like this. A bit like Stimulus Reflex, and a bit like this. So, okay. So I've probably got enough to go off and actually just write some now. It's actually pretty easy looking. Boost streams. What's this? So the turbo streams intentionally restrict official actions to CRUD related activity. These official actions, let's open this up. Turbo reference. There we go. So streams, the 8 actions: append, prepend, replace, update, remove, before, after, and refresh. Where's refresh? Refresh. So you can add custom actions. You can extend these with your own ones there. They don't really make it that obvious, but you can. Which is basically what this turbo power thing is this, but with way more verbs. work for a considerable number of use cases. We recommend you push turbo streams as far as possible before reaching for boosted streams. If you find that the CRUD isn't enough, this is this sort of like ideological part of this that I don't really buy into. It's like, look, fuck man, just let people do what they want. Don't be like, we advocate you don't do it. I mean, I guess, but also like, so? Like, if you've got a system that's better at supporting the dumb shit you're going to do, whatever. Again, that's why people like React. React's a mess, but fuck, you can do anything with it. Right? Like, there's no scenario where you go, well, I can't do that. You can. Is it going to be a mess? Yeah, fuck, probably. But it's fine, whatever. Like, you're a grown-up. There's a... Oh, yeah, here we go. It's my favourite bit. Oh, no, where is it? There's some fun snark in one of these. I've lost it. I texted it to a friend earlier. TurboBoost, yeah, so... Yeah, because again, it's like... But they live in this world that doesn't exist. Like, if this idea was 10 years ago... No, not even 10 years ago. 15 years ago, right? 16... 14, 13 years ago, right? If this was in 2011, this idea came around, it would be fucking gangbusters. But we're so far past the idea that the default now is make something big and cumbersome and complicated, which I don't agree with, to solve every problem where it needs it, because we're in this weird hype-based developer economy, which is bizarre. That would have done gangbusters an idea, a bit pragmatic, cool, and again, for so many things, super cool, and for so many things, probably the right thing to choose. But it just came way too late as an idea. I mean, the technology wasn't there to support something like this, but the point is, it ain't it. Right. Okay. Oh, that's cool. So we can chain them. That's cool. Okay. Yeah, because I don't want to, I've been shitting on TurboStream the entire time, but it's a cool idea. But just, I don't like that. I mean, it's fine. Okay. Turbo Streams is a foundational tool. Here we go. TurboBoost Streams is a foundational tool designed to help you build modern, maintainable, and scalable reactive apps with Hotwire. Allows you to break free from the strict CRUD/REST conventions that Rails and Hotwire wisely encourage. Is that snarky? I don't know. You should consider boosted streams as a substrate for building additional libraries and abstractions. Please don't use TurboBoost Streams to manually orchestrate micro-dominant updates from the server, such techniques are what gave rise to full-stack front-end and sent the industry on a decade-long journey of complexity and frustration. I find like that attitude, which again I fundamentally agree with, so dogmatic, and I hate dogma. It's like, no, complexity, no. And it's like, some things do need to be complex, and if you do need to do complex things, and again, Rails is good at this. The core of Rails is good at doing these complex things. The system you should build should be able to manage that complexity if you're advertising it as one that can. If it can't, and it does a section of it, but the caveat is, in this idealized world, we need X, Y, and Z, that's the thing that puts people off these frameworks in the first place. This is why I think it's kind of a bad poster child for Rails reactivity. Again, the language, the wording could just be marginally different and it'll be absolutely fine. Hey, look how little work you got to do, and that's the selling point of it, right? Look how little work you've got to do to make something really, really fucking slick. Great, but if you're building a full-on reactive application with a whole bunch of stuff going on, it's a fucking nightmare. So right, this looks pretty cool, actually, to be fair. So that looks pretty cool. Also, I'm pretty sure that will work with this as well. But then you don't need as much of this. Or do you? I guess. I mean, you don't... Yeah, I mean, you can do a lot of this anyway. With this, I guess. A bit more heavy-handed, but... I presume they work together. So I think... Ooh. Was that just the... What's this? Was that working? No. How to deploy fly.io. Bloody love fly.io. Cool. What else? There's other parts to this, isn't there? So, I think it's at the bottom of the page. There we go. Turbo is a suite of libraries that enhance Rails, Hotwire, and Turbo. So we're on commands, streams. We looked at elements. What's this? TurboBoost elements. What is ClickFunnels? So yeah, like this is your this is a really good example actually. This is your bog standard actual Rails customer today is what is quite clearly a these that's fun. Don't know why they've done this, but I don't mind. I'm cool with it. Yeah. So especially wait. Oh, how awesome! I think I threw shit new Twitter off the side of the thing. Yeah, there we go. Gone forever. Keep YouTube. LinkedIn. Fuck off. YouTube. Let's just drop this so it lands face up. YouTube can stay. We like YouTube. Oh. Hey. Oh. Good enough. Yeah, so this is like a really good example of like your real world Rails customer. Like there's a whole surprisingly large suite of pretty fine, solvent, mid-sized SaaS companies just happily chugging away quietly, using Rails, delivering stuff, not having drama, because Rails is kind of boring now, and it just kind of works. And you can have smaller dev teams, which makes it easier to get bigger. And if you're business minded versus tech minded, I don't know what I am, but if you think in terms of business things, if you can do more with fewer developers, which is the ultimate, and this is the thing that there's unequivocally true about Rails. If you can do more with less, you can do more with less. Mind blowing. Hate that logo though; it's horrible. But they changed it as well. Right, so, but presumably they're making use of this to power their SaaS thing. So I imagine they probably use something else on the front end. So, where were we? So this is TurboBoost Streams. Oh no, that's the wrong one. We were looking at, so Boost Elements, there we go. These need different logos or something. Right, so. Ooh, there's a website for this? Small team, big tech. Okay. Well, that's fun. I hate the logo. I hate the logo so much. Right, so. What does this do? Preview easy to react to turbo boost elements. Okay. Toggle. Is this just sort of like a toggle thing? Yep, toggle trigger tag. What? Toggle content by. Oh, okay. Is this actually linking to a video?
Nate.
Hi, Nate. Okay, so I think this is supposed to be more than this. That's fine. So let's not take the piss, but I was expecting more than that. There's a few cool things. I'm going to head off in just a moment, but there's a few cool things actually in Stimulus world, because I like Stimulus a lot. In fact, I am one of those people who've actually used Stimulus outside of. I was working on a project where it's just like old as ass spaghetti PHP app from like the 2000s, right? A mail client that's quite popular. Moderately popular, I don't know. Whatever. Point is, it was a mess, and to find a way to sort of rationalize it all the JavaScript stuff, I actually am using Stimulus because there was no latitude to replace the frames are heavily entangled with, like, they were rendered in the very core of this PHP application and then eventually spat out on the page. So you couldn't. And there's no. It was crazy. Like some bedroom guy in 2003 was like, oh, I'm so proud of this, and it was just like the worst possible spaghetti with layers and layers of abstraction and weird bullshit going on. And they had like a whole like sort of JS pseudo API layer thing which was really incoherent, and I bound a lot of the existing stuff and a bunch of new stuff, and I wrapped it up in stimulus so I could rationalize what was going on underneath to cause some of those things. It worked really well, and it created a new interface which made it easier to work with the existing stuff because you couldn't actually physically untangle it because of the way the application is constructed. Something called PHP pair. If you're old, you'll know what that is. If you aren't old, then basically it's like you can build markup in, because PHP was like a templating language, right, to start with, right? So it was an early idea to build more complex markup and complex structures in PHP, but they built an entire application around it, and this sat right in the dead fucking middle of it, and they hadn't ever unpicked it. So you had like UI elements built next to the thing that like fucking does whatever, like email processing bullshit in the same fucking place. It was a nightmare. Anyway, used to miss that. It worked really well. So I like it. Anyway, so dev tools. Are there some dev tools? Okay, well, so really this is two things, I guess. But let me quickly, before we leave, I'm going to talk to you about the stimulus ecosystem, all zero viewers. So there's some cool. The main cool thing is this thing, stimulus use. This is fantastic. So this is quite. It's a bit more reactive, because one thing that stimulus is actually really good at is it always goes to GitHub instead of the website. The website's kind of bad. One thing that stimulus is really good at is wrapping and standardizing interfaces into existing vanilla libraries. I've done a couple of them, where you can sort of take however that API is internally and re-expose it using those values. So you can have options and values, and you can readdress all the triggers, and then, like, instead of having to deal very specifically with the shape of that library, you can just wham it in stimulus, pull it apart, and then construct it in a new way that's a little bit more usable, a bit more ergonomic. I like that kind of thing, because it means that you have to think less about it. If you don't touch it for ages, come back. Stimulus is like this very standardized interface for how things work. It's a little bit clunky, but it is very uniform, which is quite cool. And stimulus use is like a bunch of composable little chunks of stuff that you can just sprinkle in, and it's really nice in the context of stimulus. I absolutely love stimulus use. It's really killer. So you've got a bunch of stuff like observer-based stuff. So you've got things like click outside. So the syntax is really simple, right? You just import it, and then there you go. You've got a default action, or you can do it like this and just do on connect. So there's a lifecycle hook thing inside stimulus. So it's got connect, disconnect, and all that sort of stuff. So on connect, you just say, use click outside. You pass in this, and then there we go. We've got whatever you want to do, and then we can just do it. It's great. Things like idle. So I'm gonna use this one. Tracks to use idle and pay. There we go. So yeah, just a bunch of these little behaviors. Things like a nice little straight up thing for the intersection API, which is really cool. Intersection observer. I need to do more with it. Actually, that same project was the first time I looked at it. It was quite cool because I had to try and attach actions, but again, I couldn't directly modify the core of this application. It was like locked in stone. So I had to like fudge a bunch of crap on the front end by like hooking into events that didn't exist and shit. Anyway, intersection, observe intersection. Imagine I said the right words. Imagine I made sense. Yeah, here we go. So, yeah, this is basically how this works. So you get a bunch of stuff with it. So, here we go. Appear, disappear. Great. So you get a bunch of these little behaviors, things like use hotkeys. This is hotkeys.js. And you get, look at that. Just, there you go. Wham little array. Got hotkeys. And it's really nice. You'll be shocked at how far you can go, especially stimulus use, how far you can go with it. There's also another little thing called stimulus components, which is not really a component library. It's more like a behavior little library thing. This is okay. There's a few here that are kind of useful. Get started. Oh, my web browser's being a dick. Oh, there we go. Yes, there's a bunch of here. Things like, that's not very useful, but things like auto submit as a little utility. So if I want to sort of do, auto submit on forms, there's things like a little wrap of chart.js, which is fun. Because again, you can make things very linear. So here we go. We just pass our JSON straight into here, and we've got, there we go, data, options. What have we got? There's only 3 attributes. Huh. So yeah, also you can change the shape of that as well. So if you don't like, for whatever reason, you don't like the shape of how attributes are passed into a library, you can change that by rebinding the values. It's really fun at that. There's one more. Hang on. Awesome stimulus JS. Some absolute poop has archived this, which is very sad. I might actually ping him a thing, be like, oh, I'll take this, or someone. But yeah, so Stimulus is in many ways the opposite of other modern frameworks available today, because it's still modern JavaScript, right? It still has TypeScript, it still has, everything. It's fully ES6. There's not actually, there's surprisingly little. You've seen almost all the sort of sugar it puts on things. Unlike Turbo, it's actually very, very unmagical. Like Stimulus, you can just learn in an afternoon, and you know everything you'll ever need to know about it. It's great. There is no state, so you do it in the DOM. There's one little thing you can get for this, which is just a little data store thing. It's pretty cool. So if we go down to here, it's at the bottom. So you've got Stimulus Store. This is quite cool. Very simple. And yeah, where is it? Where's our documentation? StimulusStore.com. Wow, I think their website's broken. Here we go. Their website's buggered, man. Yeah, there you go. And you just have a little store thing, little interface to do it using a little local storage store. Great. Here we go. Stimulus library, and then there's a few more of these. But this is quite fun. I think it's this one. There we go. Yeah, I guess so. This is quite good. This is a bunch of little mix-ins that someone's written for a bunch of different stuff. So like Ajax, form-based stuff. So again, auto submit, auto size, character counting. Dirty controller, so you can see if the values have changed, that kind of stuff. Pretty cool. Yeah, anchor spying, sticky, some media stuff. What's this? Fallback image. Yeah. So you can, like, Stimulus is really nice to be like, and I kind of wish it was more popular because it's like very, I always use the word svelte, but svelte's svelte. You know what I mean? It's Stimulus Rails autosave. It's fun. Scroll progress. Ooh, 10 months ago. Oh, I think. Oh, it's a Stimulus component. Yeah, this guy turned it into a bunch of separate repos because I tried to. Tried to submit like a PR to one of these at one point, and he's like, "No, no, what I've written is perfect, and we're not changing it." And then we're like, "Hey, bro, why did you not make this just one repo?" And he just went through his work to split it out and then just put it all back together again. It's quite funny. Yeah, so I'm going to stop there. But yeah, so I'm going to go off and I might do another stream with my results. I might make a little thing quickly. My results from playing with TurboBoost. I want to like Turbo, that's the thing. I want to like Hotwire. It's just not ready. It's not there. It needs to grow. And I think, like, I watched a talk from one of the maintainers. This guy here, Marco. And he's like, again, they lost this little, not war is the wrong word, but they lost this race to be the default reactivity engine in Rails front end, and then they left with something which is basically suboptimal. And they're like, fuck, right, what are we going to do with this? And they're making lemonade, basically. So more power to them. And I really, my problem is I'm not sure how much of this would make it into. Okay, that's the last thing I'm going to say. I'm going to go. The problem with Rails is right where the JavaScript ecosystem is very hype driven, and these little bubbles come up and drop down. And there's the problem inside the Rails community is twofold, right? One is there's a very small, a shrinking proportion of the user base that go, if DHH says it, then I'm down. The guy who runs it, I'm down. I'll follow him to the ends of the earth, even when he starts coming out about how much he thinks Elon Musk is fantastic and Trump's brilliant. It's like, fuck. But yeah, like, there's those people, and there's actually not that many of them. Shockingly, it's you'd assume it's a lot. I mean, the problem with DHH is he actually when it comes to just talking tech, a lot of times he backs a lot of the right tech horses, but also he seems to be the kind of guy who will do things that suit him, and then worry about the rest later on. Anyway, and then the other half are so against, or a lot of them are so against the current landscape of that hype-based ecosystem that JS exists in. Because I do feel like the early 2010s were a slightly more rational time in the space. Not to say like people are idiots or anything. I'm not trying to suggest that, but it's more like the hype-based, this thing's brand new, let's use this, only for it to die 6 months later type thing, was not as prevalent back then. So you'd make more holistic decisions about the technology you're about to use, right? And people were better at due diligence because the hype thing wasn't there. There's probably a whole video in that concept of how during like the infinite money era, a lot of very smart technical people got put in positions of extreme power within businesses, which then meant they had opportunities to pontificate and solidify their position by aligning themselves to technologies, and therefore helping to build this hype cycle thing that we exist in today, which is a little bit of a grift, but not a grift. Anyway, that's off topic. The point is, so many people inside the Rails ecosystem are so against anything that even remotely resembles newness, that they will also default to this thing and go, well, it's here, I've got it, fuck it, I'll use it. And the thing with Hotwire specifically, I think it's so fundamentally deficient. A friend of mine the other day described it as, it feels like a pet project that went on for too long. And I would agree. That's kind of what I feel about it. It's a very cool project, but one that is not really, I think it's going to, and again, I think in Rails, historically, I've missed a lot of this. There's been a lot of false starts with various parts of technology. Like, I think at one point, they built a really complex sort of Webpack thing and then decided to rebuild it, and that was a mess. And then they had a whole thing with like jQuery, and then they had another thing which is similar to jQuery but not quite jQuery, and then that went. And then now they've gone this whole thing of the latest one is now between Hotwire, I think called like no build, where they're doing like import maps instead of like build pipelines, and really they should have just been like, let's just use Vite because Vite's good. So now you can use import maps, which then like, oh, you don't need to compile JavaScript, you don't need to do bundling. It's like, well, no, but loads of like libraries are designed to be bundled now, and they do tree shaking and shit. And like, I know, yeah, technically a browser can load all of these as flat JS files if they want to, because we have HTTP2, cool, but also no, because a lot of the libraries you'll want to import and use will expect to be bundled, and like if Vite didn't exist, that would be annoying because Webpack's a dick, but no one uses. Well, I mean, like Vite's just eaten everything because Vite's the fucking best thing to come to. It's probably the single most impactful development tool of the last decade is Vite. Vite's insane how good it is. Just so much you just don't have to think about things anymore. It's like most of the time you just turn it on and like just fucking everything works, and then the config's rational, you can extend it. Vite's amazing. So yeah, Vite's so good. But like, I don't know what else do you know, but it's like, that's definitely a bad horse, right? You can't be a correct clock is probably wrong twice a day. That's the opposite of that saying, that idiom, I guess. But yeah, like, I think the Hotwire stuff's kind of another one of those where really what they should have done is back to inertia. I'm not saying inertia's perfect either, but inertia's kind of great. It's like, hey, just bring the front end you want. We'll just return what you expect, and then this is it. This is inertia in a nutshell. And then users, here we go. Oh, define props. Users, array, cool. There you go. You're not for the most part. You're kind of done, right? Just do that in your controller. There you go. It's now it's I'm Vue now, and it just works with like, I think it works with, does it work with Svelte? I think it works with Svelte. I know it works with oh, it does. Yeah, it works with Svelte. Yeah, React Vue and Svelte, the ones that matter. Great. And you can't. Yeah, it actually does work on Rails, but it's not like sanctioned first party, and it feels like a bit of response would be like, you know, let's avoid all of this. It's like, well, I know because you don't like it. Other people are solving problems with these tools effectively, but yeah, again, as a default, I'm very, very torn on it. So I feel like, yeah, Hotwire needs to be better, and I feel it's very unlikely that, given previous what I've just said, I don't like this, therefore I'm not going to make it better. I think this is good enough type attitude, because I think Stimulus could be better as well. But Stimulus isn't actually that new. It's pretty old. It's probably 7 or 8 years old now. It's been around for a while. It does quite little. It could do a little bit more. Stimulus with like signals and reactivity is kind of a pretty awesome little framework, to be honest, but like micro library, but alas, we don't live in that world. But yeah, I don't see any stuff like this getting merged into main, and I think that's kind of what it needs to be successful, because we look at if you think carefully, not carefully, it sounds very, sorry, it's a bad choice of words. Look at something like this. We go to, that's the wrong one. We go to Turbo Boost. Let's go to this guy's thing. Turbo Boost streams, Turbo Boost commands. There we go. 325 stars. That ain't that many stars on GitHub, and it's not it's not clearly not finished. It looks like it's probably functional, but it's not finished. You know, people aren't picking up, they're not seeing it. So what does that do for your ecosystem when people go, well, I used the built-in tools, I thought they were shit? They're going to quite often throw out the baby with the bathwater. But if you're told that's what you're supposed to do, you're either not going to look at it in the first place, or you're going to be like, why would I do this? And at least, you know, in Laravel world, where Laravel, like, Blade's actually pretty good, Blade components are actually pretty damn good, and there's not even a default component system in Rails, so you have to use Vue component. Vue component's also pretty good, but they didn't put it in main, right? So Vue component is owned by, it's maintained by like an engineer at GitHub. But yeah, no, it's not part of Rails. I think it was like 5 years ago. They're like, oh, bring components to Rails, and they were like, I don't know the reasons, but they were like, no. And it became a third-party thing, a very popular third-party thing. It's like, why don't you want fucking components in Rails? And Vue components, good. It feels very natural. It feels very Railsy because it was meant to be part of Rails. It was a PR that they had to then wrap into a gem, and then it was batshit. It's like, well, what? So it won't happen, which means that, you know, it's quite difficult to rely on things like this. I think I will have to go at this and see how it goes, and I'm using it temporarily, but I'm in that boat. I'm like, I would give me any reason you can to say I can build a big, all singing, all dancing, reactive project management application in Rails without any dependencies, and I'll bite your hand off. And right now you can say that of Laravel, you can say that of Phoenix, you can't say that of Rails. You have what's it called? Livewire is the one in Laravel. Laravel Livewire. And notice how I'm not really bad-mouthing Laravel at all, because it's hard to bad-mouth Laravel. But yeah, look at this. Oh, is this the current? Oh yeah, it's just part of. There we go. Yeah, this is pretty cool. It's basically what Blade should be by default, and that's Taylor Otwell, the creator. Taylor's a much better. I think Laravel's worse than Rails. I think when he built it, he missed some of the points that makes Rails so good. Laravel's still great, but yeah, this is so much. And again, I've used Livewire, and I hated it, but so much more comprehensive. Because you get these sort of like these things, these little extra sort of like model view things, which I find, yeah, it's not perfect, and also PHP, which is gross, but there you go, you're done. Wire, click, increment, and this is PHP. This is PHP, and it's pretty seamless. It's pretty good. In terms of functionally, it's pretty good. So yeah, this is where I really sort of struggle. Anyway,